having been invited by Charlie, and I am extremely happy as well. In 1977, 40 years ago, I bought my first pliers from Joe El Koubi, Charlie's father, and people asked me whether I trusted the El Koubi family. Obviously, there's eternal trust between us, and Claude Lombroso died 10 years ago. Time flies. But I'm here to share with you. You can take pictures, film, whatever you wish to do. I have no problem with that. And as our friend Imric was saying, I'm part of the orthodonsis group. Spanish, in fact, is my mother tongue. I got mixed up with a group of Spanish specialists who have a very small office with 40 salaried staff. Now, we're half asleep here in France when the others are making giant steps forward. Ramon or Manuel and your humble servant are part of this group. So, behind what I will be presenting today, there's a team. I would like to thank Laurent Maury, our junior, Laetitia, an assistant, who can prepare a keynote presentation, and there's a whole structure to prepare the pictures. And she's the one who is in charge of this organization. And I am only half-time at the office. It's important to realize that you're not as important as you thought you were. Now, I'd like to present an open bite case. It was my honor to translate I had the honor of translating Yanni. So how do you treat an open bite? Those are complicated. And in 2013, 2014, the patient came to us. We didn't know how to treat her, and this is what became of her. And I used the measurements taught to us by Yanni. And the ODI remains about the same, but the teeth are a disaster. This is the 65-degree angle we have. There are all sorts of measurements. That we need to do, and there's this angle here which is measured at the basis of the cranium, and at the end of the course, you're convinced of how you should treat an open bite, and you're convinced that you should not treat all open bites in the same way as I did for a very long time. When you do the overlay, you see that the patient is worsening, not too much, but whether you use the Ricketts technique or Lesion, it amounts to the same. And when you measure the ODI, it's complicated. ODI tells you whether it's going to be easy or difficult to treat the patient based on the measurements you make. So you have a guide which tells you what to expect. In this complicated patient, you start one day up here, and 1 year later, there's the patient. And between 1 year later and 4 years after the first picture, you still haven't gotten anywhere. You've tried doing all sorts of things, lingual device at night. A patient like that doesn't want to wear it, doesn't work. And 4 years later, we still don't know how to treat the patient. And one day the father says, "You're not going to leave my daughter like this. You need to do something." And one thing you will be learning with Danny Yenny is that if you have an even more complicated case, you're going to have very little contact of the roots of 6s and 7s with the basal edge of the mandible, which means that the molars aren't able to grow because the tongue is resting on this. So it's going to be extremely difficult to correct that. It's even more complicated than you thought. And look at the condyles, see what state they're in. So there's all sorts of things that you can learn with Danny which are important, which enable you to move forward. I only have 20 minutes left to tell you everything I wanted to tell you. So obviously we put the Genius devices. I put a block on those, on the 7s, which is useless. When there's an open bite, the patient doesn't have muscles or anything. If you think you're going to arrive at extrusion with the blocks, it's not going to work. And with the mistakes, you learn more. Look at the arch shape without having done anything. And the shape, as soon as you use Genius, you're able to do a number of things. The transformation of the arch happens over a period of 1 year. All of a sudden, you started correcting the open bite. In 5 months, in fact, between left and right, there's 5 months which have happened. We've been able to considerably correct the open bite, but the tongue isn't happy. On the left-hand side, we put screws, and we've tried to arrive at intrusion of the posteriors, and this is what you get. The screws are placed outside. There's a tilting of the molars. We also need screws inside to have vertical traction, which is added here. There's a parasitic effect, but the problem is that we haven't done anything about the tongue, and the tongue today continues going all over the place, and it is opening spaces at the bottom. So you say there is no tooth, well, there's no functional corridor. The tongue is there. So what do you do? What do you do with a case such as this one? What do you do to correct this space? You have to quiet down the tongue. How are you to be able to control that? Where does the tongue problem come from? Because intrusion is working fairly well with the mini screw, but the lingual function is up in the brain. And so today I need to act on the brain to correct the tongue. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. So hypnosis. Your patient is normal. Your patient doesn't have extraordinary problems. A short hypnosis session where you tell the patient to stick their tongue in their pocket, they will stick it in the pocket, which means they're going to place it on the palate and it's going to quiet down. And this is new, but I haven't invented anything with hypnosis. This is something that I got from La Salpêtrière Hospital, from the stomatology unit at La Salpêtrière with Professor Goudot, who got functional MRIs, which were done. And on the left, you see patient X, who swallows in a terrible way, and you do a functional MRI, and you see what parts of the brain function. There are 2 hypnosis sessions at a 2-week interval, and 3 months later, there was another functional MRI. And it's no longer the same parts of the brain that are functioning. So through hypnosis, you're able to get the right zones of the brain to function. And we spend a lot of time with speech therapy and all of that, well, today you will need to find someone who can do hypnosis sessions to move in the right direction. And so it's an extreme solution, but that was the novelty. This was presented last November with a professor of neurology. And these are pictures that I took off of the internet. These are not the actual before and after MRI images. It's just to explain what I saw, but I don't have these same images.
So once we've done this, then let's turn to what we are interested in. So what's new in Genius? You have Genius Cristal that I'm going to tell you all about. Then we have Genius 2, which is the Maton bracket. And then I'm going to talk about the molar tube and the new molar tubes, which we are launching. So Genius Cristal, so this is the latest model in 4 months, and you can see it here, so no problem whatsoever. Arch development, the patient is actually very well known. This is the arch development in 4 months. Very easy, no problem, everything is aligned, is moved distally. There are some little tiny tips where I'm from. The blocks here are not just laid wherever. These are beveled, and they get the patient to class 1 using the beveled edge. This is something that I've used in a number of lectures, which is why I say it is quite well known. So it's difficult to talk to you at length about this today. So this is the alignment and the crystal, the Genius Cristal bracket. It works really well. It holds well, it clips well, it's precise, and in 4 months, this is what we get. This is one of my oldest cases of my with a Genius Cristal. We put the bracket in. We have a torque and the expression of the torque that is even better. Look at the buccal sides that are visible. Of course, it tips on the buccal side, and then the torque is installed from the 1825 Thermal Ultra, and the size of the Genius Cristal slot is much better than with other brackets. And so that's the torque, and still those beveled blocks to lock class 1 so that it doesn't move, so that you don't get aware of the top teeth on the bottom brackets. At this stage, quality check after 1825 if you don't use Genius or other systems. So quality check. This quality check today is not just useful for the patient, but it means that you can manage remotely. So I can be at home, for instance, I can receive the photos, and I can recommend what should be done by Leslie or Laura, my junior orthodontist. So this is how we work. And of course, you took a panoramic X-ray to check the axes and make sure everything is going well. So here, except for 14, everything is bonded properly. Then bracket Genius 2 metal. This is what I'm going to present just now. What's different here? So this is the 3D that we received of the bracket. This is my first case that I bonded last week. We had the first one, the first model of brackets, Genius 2, that was only just launched. So the differences between Genius on the left and on the top and Genius 2 on the bottom, well, you can't really see them, slightly less broad. And this is what you're going to be seeing for this Genius 2 bracket compared to the previous one. Here, this is bonding. We received some premolar ones that can be either with an offset base or a normal base. And you have the specifications here. So what are the changes for Genius 2? So this is a much nicer image of it. And here you can see how the base is smaller. The base is less broad than it used to be. So that's the first thing. Secondly, and this is also very simple, is to have a slot size that is a maximum of 22-28 and rather 21.5, 27.5. So in the mold that is used to manufacture, we made a mold that after polishing and everything, you could get under the 22-28. So you don't have a bracket that is a minimum of 22-28, which means that you don't actually need a lot of torque difference or smaller torque, higher torque to counter a design issue. Here, the design and the manufacture is good, and it's a maximum of 22-28. From there, the edges are aligned with the base, so you have a reduced surface of the base, but you don't have reduced bonding, nevertheless. The marks on the brackets to find the number of the tooth if you mix them up, for instance. This is etched. Then you have the hooks for the canines that are shorter. Genius 2 on the left, on the right Genius, because sometimes the bracket was hurting the gum, and you can see the breadth as well. That's different. Now you also have a click, an audible click, when you open and close the bracket, which you didn't hear before, because one of the main elements in this change is the internal coil that allows for the opening or closure of the bracket. So we've increased the torque of the canines, upper and lower, to 6 degrees. We were at +3, so still a positive torque. And on the first upper molars, we also have 6 degrees of distal offset. And all tubes, of course, for the first molars are self-ligating. The 6 degrees of distal offset are important for the upper molars to have the distal offset that was lacking in some of our treatments. Then the base of the first molar is treated with a laser currently, which means that it gives perfect bonding despite the current size. And this base is going to be reviewed and modified so that it can have even better bonding. So if you look at both, this was done with my iPhone, okay? And with just a little magnifier tool. So you can see, and these are the real ones. It's not photoshopped or, we didn't cheat. You might think it's too small, it's not going to hold. And you can see it's got the marking for the tooth. This is the breadth for the slot of Genius 2. It's exactly the same. We just decreased the bases. It looks smaller, but the bracket is exactly the same on a smaller base. And the clip. The clip looks bigger even. And it is. So, thanks to the technological changes and the improvement of the machine that injects the metal, on the same size bracket, we've reduced the sides, and the clip covers the bracket even better, and it's even more effective. The only thing that's bigger is the length. The bracket is a tiny bit higher, but in the photos that I showed you during bonding, it doesn't really make much of a difference on the buccal side of the tooth. So the marking, and on the canine bracket, again, same thing, same width. the same base for the clip. The hook is much shorter, so it's not going to be in the way as much. And here you see the difference of surface between the bases of Genius 2 and Genius that we had before on the upper central. So smaller bracket, but keeping an action and a clip that is broader than before. So we gain the quality and the elegance. I can see that the Italians here are happy about this new elegance. Vertical height, slightly higher, as I said, but not much. This is for one of the centrals. And the brackets are still delivered in the usual box. And I've finished. I'm sorry, I don't know how long it took. Thank you.